and every master teacher is saying, seek love and understand love. I'm like, well, that just means one thing. I should really go and discover what love is. You can't prove love. It's there and we know what it is. And this is the ingenious part of love in our lives, is that we actually do know.
We are the one who created our own limitations to be able to experience that love, to be that love, right? What kind of suggestions that you have for people who are experiencing difficulties when it's sort of when this limitation is already like on the subconscious level?
Without self-love, we cannot receive. What we have within, we give out. What we give out, we get back.
Hello, everyone. Salam, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Doesn't matter what time you're watching this. Welcome back to Learning Living with me, Ali. And today in this episode, I am so thrilled, so happy, so very grateful to have this guest. We have the founder of the Love Foundation and also Internal Insights. He's a speaker, he's an author, international speaker. And this, I want to share a story about you, Harold. Hello, Harold, all the way from Florida. I'm here in Indonesia, and but I want to share. This is an episode where I would like to share something about you, if you don't mind, before we actually have the conversation. I want to share this to everyone who's watching this, who's listening to this podcast right now. I first found Harold's book. It's called Unconditional Love, An Unlimited Way of Being, a book that have really changed my life in January 2008. So it's over 16 years ago. I was still living in Bulgaria at the time. I was working there. And I feel like I feel the need to learn more about how to love myself. I'm having challenges at that part, in that phase of my life. And his book came across on Amazon, and it's an easy click for me at that time because it already had some great reviews. So I bought it, and again, that book, it's something that really affected me, changed how I see myself, how I love myself in a way, like in such a better way, and changed me significantly. And I have never ever thought that 16 years later I get the chance to host you in this conversation. So again, I'm very honored to have you here. So welcome to Learning Living, Harold.
It's absolute pleasure and delight. And I just think it's so awesome that, you reached out and actually shared that you had read my book. So I think the conversation is just going to be awesome and wonderful between us. And let's see where it takes us.
All right. I cannot wait. So you founded the Love Foundation, and you wrote books about unconditional love. Um, I would like later on to ask about your journey, but before we go there, let's talk about this topic first, about unconditional love. That what does that mean exactly? For people who don't know what it means, let's start there, and then let's go deeper from there.
Well, the title of the book actually kind of gives it away, but I'll explain it this way: is that my background is more of a business background, and there was a point where I started asking myself questions about life, the universe, and everything. And in that questioning, I started to just come across books and topics and tapes and titles, and just started to kind of dive into who am I? Really, kind of the question. I can say now it was more directly, who am I? And in that process of looking around, contemplating, just discovering all these various aspects of me, I kept finding love as being like the core topic back of everything. I didn't have really a religious background of any type. My parents, gave us the freedom to explore that ourselves. So at one point I thought, well, I should really kind of know about the major religions around the world. So I picked up a book, and it covered all the major religions and the minor religions, and kind of what the philosophy or the master teacher was behind each religion. And after reading this rather lengthy book, which was summarizing the history of all of these various religions, again, I came across this idea that every religion was founded on a singular concept of love. And I thought, well, this is kind of fascinating to me. And you have to, I said that I was in the business world, so you have to understand that, I was having a very logical experience, a very organized administrative kind of experience. And I'm looking at this constant understanding of love. And I thought, if this has been the core message on the planet for eons of time, and that everything kind of springs off of that, and every master teacher is saying, seek love and understand love. I'm like, well, that just means one thing. I should really go and discover what love is. And of course, once I kind of captured that love, I thought, well, we're not talking about normal. Well, I say normal. The way we kind of in modern cultural society, and this is kind of universal around the globe, we have a tendency to use the word love as more of a cast-off, throw-off word. We love our car, we love our house, we love our family, we love our nation. Of course, we love our children if we have them. We love our parents if we, And I kept thinking, well, this is like, we're just kind of saying it, but we're not really understanding the feeling, the association of what really love is. And I thought, well, there's got to be more. And I started to think, well, really, there's this concept of unconditional love. And typically, kind of universally, and understand that part of my conversation will be American-centric and Western-centric, but globally, it still kind of applies with the similar understandings that we have a tendency to only see love or unconditional love as the purveyance of a God, or whatever label one might play, that a creator loves us unconditionally, and then the somewhat American-centric, but I think it still holds universal. Our dogs are considered man's best friend, and they love us unconditionally. So you have God or dog, and everything else is not a part of unconditional love. And that made no common sense to me. It made no realistic sense that this isn't something that is outside of us. This has to be something that is a part of us, inside of us, and intrinsic in our lives. So I started to think, well, these definitions don't really work for me. And I thought, well, I need to kind of explore and kind of define unconditional love and give it kind of a contemporary, modern day understanding that actually is applicable and universal. Again, that feeling that this is a universal understanding that really is something that we should all be able to explore and encourage and invite into our understanding, and then find out how it actually works in our world. So I took the two words, unconditional and love, and I broke them down. And I started with the word love, and I said, okay, so we love our car, or we love various aspects of life. We have this kind of universal, we can apply love to so many categories and subjects in our world. In essence, when you actually explore love more as a term itself, it's like, well, you can't prove it. You can't prove love. It's there, and we know what it is. And this is the ingenious part of love in our lives, is that we actually do know. When we say even the simple word love, we recognize that there's some part of us that acknowledges love. Just as, for many people, better part of their lives, they acknowledge fear. Again, that's a generalized word, but fear is something that people, can be afraid of something. And that comes very quickly. And again, you can't really prove that either, but it's a sense that we're feeling something. So I thought, well, here we are with this word love, and on a deeper intrinsic level, it really is a way of being. When we are in a state of love, we are being love in that moment. And in that way of being, it started to make more sense. So I then threw the word unconditional back into this in order to understand love in a broader term. Unconditional is to be unlimited, to be without condition. So put these two together, and unconditional love is an unlimited way of being. And with that, I would inject the fact that it's also important to recognize that this particular moment, right here, right now, is the moment we're living. This is the moment that we're being love or not love. And I say that because our brains are really kind of designed to consider life based on the past. So we have a tendency to use memories of our experiences. And in this moment, we often contemplate the past, and we try to find resources and all these types of things that say, okay, this is what I need right now to survive. Or when we have a more quiet moment, we use our imagination. So what would I like my future to be? Well, that's really imagination. So our past right now is a memory. Our future right now is the power of our imagination. This is the moment where we are physically, emotionally, mentally, and just say generically, spiritually whole and complete. So in this moment, say, for example, if we take a deep breath, we are actually present in our physical body. We quiet our mind and we're like here in this moment. This is when we experience love. This is when unconditional love is an unlimited way of being. In other words, right here and right now, we have pure potential. All things are possible. Because in fact, our imagination, when we focus upon it, we can explore all kinds of avenues of potential, and then we can choose to go down different pathways. The past is in the past. There's nothing we can do with it other than to release it if it still somehow infringes upon our current moment. But the real power in our life is right here, right now. And when we acknowledge ourselves right here, right now, and understand that we are unconditional love, we are unlimited, and we can be this going forward in our life as kind of our foundation, then everything starts to make sense. Everything starts to fall in place. I say that because most of humanity is seeking love outside of themselves. This has been for eons of time. If you were to pick up any radio station or any music anywhere in the world, no matter what culture, there's an inordinate amount of love songs, and usually love songs based on externalized love, relationship love, romantic love, or anything that's its opposite, which is lack of love, the desire for love, lack of partnership, breaks. In other words, a tremendous amount of even our musical culture around the world is based on this concept of love, but it's really not understood. And for me, it became important and interesting to find out what this really meant and how did it work in my life all day, every day. Because in the end, I'm the one that's living this life. I come into the world alone, even though I'm surrounded with all the help and the guidance in the world. And I leave this world alone, even though I'm surrounded by all the help and all the guidance of the universe. So I needed to become my own best friend. Well, how do you do that? Well, with the understanding of love, that becomes the beginning point, because once I started to really understand my potential and realize that love is inside me and it's my thoughts and feelings that are creating the world, where I place my attention. Well, if I start to place my attention on love, and particularly, self-love, starting with that, then of course I start to interact with the world around me completely differently. So as you mentioned internal insights. Part of that was in 1990, when I started to understand this, I created internal insights. In other words, I wanted to have my own insights about my life. And that was the pivot point of change, because I realized I had choice. And if you have choice, then I can choose love. If I live in the moment, I can choose love. If I'm conscious in the moment, I can choose love. In other words, the power within all of us, the unlimitedness in all of us, is within ourselves. We read it, all day, every day about cliches, all this great grandeur. But when you actually start to apply it, it all fundamentally starts to make sense. And fast forward, now 35 years later of really exploring this consciously, here we are having the conversation. So I just gave you a whole lot of information that you get to unpack. Now, tell me what you want to know from there.
I have so many things that I would like to ask you. Like, first thing. So, love, you explain it as a way of being, right? It's a way of being, and people can see love as, when I say being, it means people can see it as feeling loved, or loving someone else or something else, right? Now, between those two, do you see any difference on how we can apply this unlimited way of being when it comes to yourself, and when it comes to others?
That's a perfect question, because it leads us into the understanding that without self-love, we cannot receive. What we have within, we give out. What we give out, we get back. So if we have love within, it's very easy to receive love back. If we do not have love, if we have criticism, shame, guilt, worry, all these different types of intrinsic less than feelings, it is nearly impossible for us to receive the love that is given to us. It just, most people don't let it in. And most of it because they're looking for it externally. And it's kind of the underlying point to all of this is something that we are. We are love. We are, and I will just expand it really quickly, the idea that we have trillions of cells doing trillions of things right here and right now. We have no conscious control over our breathing, our heart rate, everything that's going on. We have what we do have recognition of is consciousness, self-awareness of our thoughts and our feelings. And this was a very profound moment in my very early exploration, because in any one moment, it kind of occurred to me, they would often say, we have so many thoughts a day. Well, let's just say in any one moment, and of course, a moment could be however long but we'll just make this as a metaphor. In any one moment, I have say 50 thoughts. Well, prior to my recognition that I'm a thinking, feeling being, I just went and acted and reacted to all the various thoughts and feelings. I mean, I would think things and I would certainly pursue things, but I was really reacting to my own thoughts and feelings because I had no sense of choice in that. So in any 50 thoughts, I was probably living vicariously through 40 of them with no direct conscious involvement. And maybe 10 of them, I'm like, go to the store, I would be more conscious of. And this is kind of how we have been living on the planet. But once I realized I had choice, then I started to pay attention to my thoughts. I started paying attention to the self-criticism, the self-worry, the self-guilt, the concerns about, what other people might think of me, how I behave, what other people might say of me, and those types of things. And I started to bring my power back within myself. And I started to say, well, I have a choice for myself to pay attention to my thoughts and my feelings, which means I'm giving my control back to myself. Which types of thoughts and feelings do I wish to entertain? And in that, of course, became this deeper understanding of love. Well, I expect others to love me, but if I'm not loving myself, there's really no way that I can experience love. I can kind of tangibly explain this for a moment, because if I were to take my hand here and say, just for pretend this is somebody else's hand, and I touch this, we have a tendency to instantly say, oh, that person is touching me. That's not actually what's happening. I'm feeling the nerve sensations on my fingers and translating it. Everything that goes on in life is happening inside us. So take this trillions of cells doing trillions of things, and then think that every cell has trillions of atoms. It's mind-bogglingly huge. Now, let's go out into the cosmos, beyond our star system, beyond our galaxy, and realize that there are trillions of stars in every galaxy, and there are trillions of galaxies that we know of. So we know that the atomic structure is identical everywhere, and that in fact the supernovae that create these elements, actually when they explode, they go out into the universe, and the very earth that we live upon is made of stardust. Our physical bodies are made of stardust because we are coming from the earth. We're in the material plane of the earth, so everything that makes us up is coming from the earth. So we are stardust. So we are part of the cosmos, and we actually have a cosmos within us. Well, when you get that big, and I'm expanding us that big because I want people to realize that many of the things that we entertain in our mind all day, every day, is trivial in comparison to our magnificence. It's trivial in comparison to our grandness. And we really have spent far too much time looking outside of ourselves, judging experiences and others, when in fact, all we've really been doing is judging ourselves. And when you start to release these layers off, and you start to forgive and release these layers of self, and you go into the intrinsic essence of who we are, and you just love and realize that we're made of love, I mean, it just starts to rework our orientation so we become an example of love because we are love. And then when we go out into the world, we start to attract more love, but it's more universal love rather than physiological love or romantic love. So there's nothing outside of us that completes us. Now, I'm generalizing, so we're packing a lot of information into short
Yeah.
sound bites. But I love being able to explain this very practical. I think in the very beginning when I started to understand more about life, and no spiritual awakening, no out of body, this was just me exploring and understanding. The more I did that, the more I realized it was all coming from within. The more I realized that I am a magnificent part of cosmos, the universe, and then in that grandness, this is the interesting aspect, is because once you recognize the self-love of yourself and you start to recognize the spark of universal oneness, that's what you start to see in the world. And that's what you start to invoke in the world. And that's actually how we make change happen. We have a tendency to want to react to things, and we want to do its opposite. We're, a dualistic society, so we want to push against what we don't like. Well, it's very different when you have love as a way of being, because then you go out into the world and your very essence of being and awareness of love, you start to see that in everybody else. So the interaction with everybody else changes. So you see the same spark in yourself you see in the person in front of you. Now you see, shall we just say, if I see my divinity, I see the divinity in someone else. If I see the spark of love in myself, I see the spark of love in someone else. Now, doesn't mean that we don't see personalities or we don't have reactions to belief systems or things that people are sharing, but in the core essence, I see my magnificence, therefore I can see the magnificence in all the others, which means I start kind of metaphorically, if you start with a smile, you're going to get a smile back. If you start with anger, you're going to get anger back. So if I recognize all of us on the planet are magnificently beautiful beings, then I'm going to naturally have a very different experience as I go out into the world, which is exactly what we have been pivoting our consciousness on the planet right now, to pivot from this old dualistic society where it's us and them. There is no us and them. There's only us. And the us is actually part of the whole cosmos, not just part of the planet. So you get really big so that you can come back into this moment-to-moment world where you're walking through all of these experiences. And, for many that may be listening, this is the very first time they've even contemplated unconditional love. In contemplating it, not all of this is going to make sense instantly. This is something that we go out into and spend the rest of our life exploring. And with a different understanding, a different mindset, different heart set, we have a different experience. And all of a sudden the world becomes our oyster. All things are possible. Then you start going out into the world and you shed these old limiting belief systems and you become more of yourself and who we are. We are not the success of our material trappings. We are the understanding of our emanation of love. And then everything else falls into line with that.
Okay, so when you said that in order for us to be able to being like loving unconditionally, we first need to be able to love ourselves first unconditionally, right? Because you cannot give what you don't have, right? So and then you just mentioned about the beliefs, the limiting beliefs that we might have, that might make it difficult for us uh, to love ourselves unconditionally. Uh, like, do you see, like from your experience as well, how often do you see that this limiting beliefs that people have, like how big of an impact has it been for people in order for them to be able to love themselves better?
It is the overwhelming momentum of impact for virtually everybody on the planet. In other words, the questions that I ask of individuals are questions that they've never heard before. And the things that we share about unconditional love, in the way that we share them, the way that I've shared them through my books and through other avenues, really hasn't been shared this way, because the purveyance of unconditional love has been limited in definition to,
Mhm.
again, the God, the dog, the mother. These are the elements of, the few places where we are supposed to find unconditional love, which is not entirely true. Because, our mothers are going to have conditions. Our religions place a lot of conditions on God. And any one day, if you're not treating the dog right, it might not love you so much, or we might not perceive it so much.
Yeah.
So this is a concept. And again, I shared that this, the definition is really a modern interpretation of unconditional love that makes it more practical and pragmatic for understanding. Because when we bring it back to ourselves, we align with our innate nature. So thoughts and feelings create a reality. Excuse me. So the rooms we're sitting in, for example, or the chairs we're sitting upon, before they were a chair, before it was a room, what was it? Well, it was the materials. In your case, brick background, chair, walls, part of a building. Before it was that, it was raw materials out in the world, the sands and the timber and what have you.
Yeah.
Before it was that, it was a blueprint of some nature. Now, whether a physical blueprint for a building or just an idea concept for a chair, it was a blueprint. Well, that blueprint was conceived of by somebody that says, I want to build this building here and I want to put this kind of room here. A thought held with enough steady desire, a feeling, becomes a reality. In other words, I could say, oh, I want to build a building, and I could just sketch out a little building, a piece of paper, and say, well, that's nice, and then toss it away or just file it away and never do anything with it. But if I'm sincere in intent, if I have a desire to actually have a physical building in this space and I want it to look this way, we take the thought, the imagination of a thought, and we hold to it until we get it to the point where we attract the builders and the supplies and everything that's built, and then we're physically sitting in this room. This is how life works. Our thoughts and feelings create our reality. So it becomes paramount for us to understand and pay attention to what types of thoughts and feelings we're entertaining. If we're entertaining loving thoughts, appreciative thoughts, positive thoughts, engaging thoughts, expansive thoughts, our world expands. If we entertain negative thoughts, shames, guilt, worry thoughts, and we have those corresponding feelings to go with it, and we feel really bad about ourselves, we feel really ashamed about ourselves, feel really guilty about ourselves, that's what we're creating. In other words, the point of power is within us. So the more I can choose to love myself, over time, we begin to build new momentum. It's kind of like getting off the old train track of negativity, not starting up on a new track. You're starting on a new track and you're saying, I'm choosing to be part of this world. I'm choosing to be here to enjoy my world. I'm here to be happy. I'm here to be my magnificence. I'm here to be an imaginative, creative being, and I'm going to express myself creatively in all these ways. I'm kind of a classic example. I mean, prior to my kind of inner shift to inner awakening, inner awareness, I was doing everything right, but I wasn't happy. I had the right corporate jobs. I was moving up in careers. I had the right houses, the right cars. And in other words, I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to be doing, but I wasn't happy. And the reason I wasn't happy, in hindsight, I now better understand it, is that I was a people person. I was corporate management, so I understood why management would have visions and they would, run a company. And then I also liked the frontline people who interacted with customers, and I found how powerful they were and how much a difference they made in the success of the company. But what I didn't understand is why the visionaries of the company, the leaders of the company, didn't have that same respect and mutual understanding that everybody is important. And I found myself kind of in an uncomfortable position. I think that's why I started to explore my own inner journey. I wanted to understand how we operate as individual humans, no matter where we are on the planet. In other words, we all laugh, we all cry, we all have our imagination of desires, hopes, dreams, and we also have our shortcomings and our fears and our worries and our concerns. This is universal. So it doesn't matter what shape, size, age, culture, religious background, non-religious background, scientific understanding, it really doesn't matter. We are all magnificent beings of love on the planet. And that is not something that I have found anyone sharing in great ways that says, I recognize my name just by the fact that I've got trillions of cells doing trillions of things right here, and that I can use the power of my imagination to create a beautiful world for myself and for others. That's creatorship. Call it what you want. That is a level of creatorship. And where I place my thoughts and hold my feelings steady, I do manifest the things that my heart dreams. And having come from kind of a business world and moved into a creative world, I never expected, I never saw myself as a writer. And yet all of a sudden I found myself writing. I was a quiet, shy person. I would never go in front of camera. It's all reversed. I mean, I've done countless of TV and radio and podcasts and everything. And I enjoy expressing myself in so many different formats that I would have never even conceived as possible originally. And it was because I started to shift my understanding, and where I let that inner critic go and I let go of these limiting belief systems, I allowed myself to at least explore. And as I explored, I found that I was good at things that I never knew I was good at. And I found that I enjoyed things that I never knew I would enjoy. And that's kind of what I love bringing back out in the world, is to encourage people. And hopefully, and my goal is to inspire people to realize their own magnificence, that they have within themselves infinite potential to become whatever they wish to be. You can overcome illness, you can overcome finances, you can overcome relationships by changing the way you think about life. And if you start enjoying being your own best friend, then as you walk through life, you create lots of best friends, because you're a best friend with yourself, and you're not looking for others to complete you. You're whole and complete in yourself. And when you go out with this understanding of, I'm okay with myself. I mean, I think that kind of answers your question of, the original question is, just be okay with yourself. It's okay to be who we are. And there's nothing that we have to be. There's nothing in this moment that is conditionally keeping us from love other than ourselves. We're the ones doing it. There's no entity or energy or anything outside of us that keeps us from loving ourselves. It's strictly our belief systems and the way we perceive ourselves. And if we can release that limitation, then we can begin to explore what our true potential is, which leads me to a question. And since you read my book, here's the pop quiz time. The question I often ask, and this kind of, in a way, through the question expresses what were you, how does this go out in the world, is, do you love yourself unconditionally? I pose that
Yes.
to you.
At this point of my life, yes. And I also believe that it is something that I need to maintain, meaning that I also need to put effort, and I also need to believe that it's not something difficult. Otherwise, I'm going to feel that it's difficult. If I feel it's going to be difficult, then I will experience difficulties in maintaining it. But I do believe so. I do believe so, and I do believe that I have to consciously maintain that belief. Otherwise, there might be, because the inner critic is always there for me. It's always there, and I think for everybody. But at least the way I see it now, it's, I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to befriend it, be compassionate with it, ask compassionate questions to it, and I actually have like regular conversations with it, like literal conversations with it. So in order to in order to be able to maintain that belief, because otherwise, at least from my experience, when I try to fight it, then it becomes a struggle. That it's just an exhausting process, and that's my personal experience. So,
You get an A+ for that answer.
ah,
So what often happens is, it's spontaneous, it's in the moment, the right time, right space for the conversation. So say someone crosses my path, comes into my life in some way, and the combination of their questions spurns the eventual question of, do you love yourself unconditionally? For virtually everybody, that is the first time they've ever heard that question. Do I love myself unconditionally? Well, you have to kind of sit with it for a moment and say, well, what does that question even mean? And then I fill in some of the blanks about the now moment, our thoughts and feelings create a reality, because it is helpful to have a reference point. But for many people, the idea of I love myself unconditionally is first and foremost a question that they have to contemplate. And secondly, it brings up almost instantly all the reasons why they can't love themselves. So the question corresponding to that response is, okay, if you were ever going to love yourself unconditionally, when do you think you would be loving enough to where you could actually say, oh, I love myself unconditionally? Like, in other words, how much do you need to process, analyze, and let go of before you're ready to love yourself unconditionally? And I will often say, this is Wednesday. I said, okay, so by next Wednesday at this time, do you think you could have contemplated unconditional love enough to where you can say next Wednesday at this time, okay, I think I'm ready to say I love myself unconditionally? Well, next Wednesday at this time is now. Where I'm sitting right now is now.
Yeah.
So this now and that now are the same now. So if there ever is going to be a point where I say I love myself unconditionally, when would be a good time? In other words, even if you don't say fully embrace it in its entirety, which you can't, because unconditional love ultimately is just expansion
And
of consciousness. So I'm going way out there in the sense that you can't actually define it and say, now I got a grasp of it, because to your point, the exploration is ongoing. The difference is, and this is how part of what you shared spurns this kind of response, is that if I choose to love myself unconditionally right now, I embrace it here. I've made that choice. I've brought it into this now moment, which means it is tangibly real for me. And I now have a foundation. I no longer have to ask myself that question specifically, because I've already embraced it and brought it into myself. Now, over time, certainly there are going to be a lot of conditions, and this is a conditional world. I mean, you just can't help it. You can't know light if you don't know dark. It is going to be conditioned. Again, to your point, though, is as you go through life, you can continue to explore what unconditional love means. And the difference is now it's no longer a critical, oh, I just failed my unconditional love test. It's impossible, because we are perfecting ourselves. We are expanding consciousness. So if we acknowledge ourselves as loving ourselves unconditionally right here and right now, that means next Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, when we think, oh, I'm being a bit conditional, and say, wait a minute, I do love myself unconditionally. You have your foundation, you have your base point. So you can always go back. It's like taking a deep breath in this moment is how you bring your physical, emotional, mental body back into this moment. The same way when your consciousness is out there and you're feeling conditioned, say, wait a minute, I love myself. I love myself enough to think differently about this situation. I love myself enough to have a different perspective on this. I've already acknowledged my self-love. So this is just a condition that's crossing my path that's giving me an opportunity to release its limitation. And you do this over and over and over again, and kind of the boulders of life become the rocks of life, become the pebbles of life, become the grains of sand of life. And over a life experience, the feeling of unconditional love is essentially spontaneous. So you encounter a condition and you immediately realize its unconditional nature. That kind of is what you were saying, is yes, there's a constant recognition, but the amount is, you don't effort it. You begin to realize, oh, there's a limiting thought. Here's an unlimited thought. There's a limiting experience. Here's an unlimited experience. So over time, it becomes more and more and more a part of you, to where you are walking around saying, I love myself unconditionally. And I recognize myself as a magnificent being, which means I see that in all others, even when the individual, for example, or the experience or whatever we perceive in front of us seems to be traumatic or dramatic or overbearing. You can see past that facade of personality, and you can see into the depths of the reality. You can see in the cloud is the silver lining, and behind the cloud is the sun. In other words, these are all metaphors about how we can walk through life. We can always find love in any circumstance. When we orient ourselves to love, that's how we find it. If we only see ourselves as not love, we will orient ourselves to reacting to whatever is in front of us, or at times inside us, because it's all going on. It's in our beingness. It's in our head and it's in our feelings. We are the ones having the experience. A person standing exactly next to me is not going to have the same experience. We want everybody to believe what we believe. I'm not trying to get you to believe me. I'm saying go explore your life for yourself. There's nothing I can do to convey love. I can't prove it. I can just say that we all know it's there. And I can say by my personal experience, the more I understand myself, the easier it is to walk through the world and make choices that are empowering for myself and have interactions that are empowering for others. Because if I recognize my magnificence and I come across someone else and I see their magnificence, I'm going to draw out of them their greater potential. In other
Yeah.
words, a smile begets a smile, anger begets anger. Anger
Mhm.
destroys, a smile unites. And this is kind of the essence of why I do all this, is that we are a diverse humanity. Everybody's going to have their own unique experience. And when we have a foundation of love, we become collaborative, we become helpful, we become kind, we become compassionate. We drop all the limitations, war and fight and control and power and ego and all these things that limit us.
Mm.
We let go. We are no longer then subject to what's going on in the world, because we're living in the world, but we're not of it, because we're living in a world of love for ourselves, and we're making a difference where we are. We cannot control things that are going on 3,000 miles away. We can influence it because everything's connected.
Yeah.
Our thoughts of love go into those collective thoughts of love, just as thoughts of fear go into the collective thoughts of fear. We can
Mhm.
choose what we are entertaining, and then as a result, we actually have a powerful love is infinitely more powerful than fear. When we
Yeah.
give into fear, there's like no solution. When we give into love, there's unlimited possibilities.
And for when you said like we need to let go those limitations and we need to release them. Now, for those who are experiencing difficulties to do that, especially when it's when they're creating this, because I believe it's we are the one who created our own limitations to be able to experience that love, to be that love, right? Because it's about being. Um, and when those limitations are has been created like repeatedly, and it's already like embedded, it's in our subconscious. How like what kind of suggestions that you have for people who are experiencing difficulties when it's sort of when this limitation is already like on the subconscious level?
Very quickly, there's a research that reveals a universal pattern of phases that people go through in their journey of discovering and living their life purpose. And you can learn and find out in which phase am I in right now, and what's the next phase, and most importantly, how do I get there? Find your answers in Uncover Your Unique Purpose, a comprehensive and practical guide to discovering your life purpose. It's a research-based book and as well covered with all the exercise you'll need to discover your unique purpose. Get this book now and take a real step to your most unique self-discovery journey. This book is available on Amazon worldwide. And now, let's go back to the conversation.
Well, it's helpful if we understand that when we come into this world, from birth to around age 6, 7, we are sponges, and we pick up on vibrations, because we are ultimately, we haven't shared that yet, but we are vibrational beings. In other words, we are electromagnetic, we are vibrational. The air that passes through my vocal cords, that's an energy that I've breathed in and now I'm breathing out. Well, you're interpreting what that vibration is as sound, as words. Anyone that's listening, it's wonderfully scientific. Physics are all involved, and then there's this whole understanding of consciousness where our thoughts and feelings create a reality. Or we have to be aware of our thoughts and feelings. As children, we are developing, so we absorb the vibrations around us, whether spoken or not. So those that are closest to us, our parents, our siblings, our religious leaders, our school leaders, whatever we're encountering, all of those belief systems are being imprinted upon us. And because we don't have a deciphering mechanism to say this one works and that one doesn't, we just kind of absorb everything. So when you get trained, and I'm saying, training our thought and our feeling for those formative years, we then kind of go into puberty and we start to begin to question a lot of these things. Then we go into early adulthood and we begin to try to cast off a lot of the things that we've learned from families or cultures, societies. And yet there's still an individuation of our own personality, our own beingness, our own soulness, our own grandness that is always present. So call it a higher self or a capacity that is aware of us, observes us, and then doesn't interfere and allows us to explore and also kind of holds our higher potential. When we love ourselves, when we find, whatever age we decide to, consider, well, I'm going to love myself, we begin to connect with that greater, grander self, which is our pure potential. And we begin to let go of and say, well, that's not really how I see life. And it takes, with love, for an understanding for as long as I've been experiencing it and playing with it, enjoying it, my experiences are a little experiential. For someone that's just starting it, it might be difficult for you to identify a limiting belief. But if we go inside ourselves and really allow ourselves to be who we are and say, this is how I see the world, and then have the courage to live that way, have the courage to live that truth. In other words, I believe in a peaceful world. I believe in a humanity that is filled with potential. I see a world where when people are aligned with themselves and okay with themselves, that collaborative, that compassionate, kind connection just brings about solutions that we can't even fathom at the moment, because we're all brilliant pieces of the puzzle and every single person contributes. There is not a person on this planet that doesn't contribute to the whole. So it doesn't matter if we're the most intelligent individual or the most creative individual, it all matters. Every aspect matters. And each of us are given gifts that are unique to us that can make a difference right where we're at. So it doesn't matter status, in a lot of nations, status is an issue, where you are well, anyone can rise out of it. I've encountered, for example, countless individuals, they've had some kind of a disease or a traumatic physical experience, and they, rather than choosing to be a victim, they decided they were going to make the most out of life. They found a way to be positive in the experience. One gentleman lost his leg in a boating accident, and he ended up climbing all the peaks of all the 50 states in America. That was his response. My mother had cancer for the first time in 1985. She is still with us in 2024, having had 5 other cancers. She's survived every one of them. Well, she's outlived any doctor that she's ever had. She's outlived any other fellow cancer, patient. It's just, you start to realize that our attitude about life is what makes life. And if we have a positive attitude about ourselves and our relationship to everything, and part of it is we can recognize our magnificence, because en masse on this planet, we are, for the most part, considered downtrodden and unworthy. It just is intrinsic almost in our cellular makeup that we are fight or flight and base survival, and clearly that's not who we are. Who we are is what we think and feel. So if we decide we want to, get our degree in college, or we want to become a doctor, there will always be ways that open up when we desire that. And we see countless examples of people doing the undoable, seemingly accomplishing the impossible, because they didn't allow themselves to be limited by what they saw could or couldn't be, or what others told them could or couldn't be. And I think that's kind of fundamentally the inertia that we have to overcome, is to learn to think and feel for ourselves and have our own views on life that are not colored by the opinions of others. And that takes an enormous amount of courage and inner strength to dive deep and say, this is how I see the world. And I know that can change. And I know that I can become more. And I know that I'll learn more as I go along. In fact, the less we know, the more we get to find out. If we think we know it all, then there's nowhere to go. So these are things that are driven from within, from hopefully a spark, or, as you said, you went through many books, you came across mine, and mine helped you at that moment to realize a bigger part of yourself. That's all of what the words do. Nothing we're sharing here today makes a difference. We cannot change anyone, nor should we try, because it's not our purveyance to inflict our opinion on anyone else. What we're sharing is that in your life, you've become a different and more expanded being. In my life, I've become a different, more expanded being. And that expansion is ongoing. We know that we're becoming more all day, every day. And that's exciting, especially for individuals like us that seek that exploration and seek that expansion. Others might be perfectly happy to, work a 9-to-5 job and they don't want that, they're perfectly okay in their mind, and that's okay too. I think that's the difference. It's like, if you're okay where you're at, be okay where you're at. Be honest and truthful to yourself. And when you do that, then your interaction with your spouse or your mate or your parents or your community or your children, it all changes. I mean, because the perspective changes in you, your interaction changes with others, and then what you get out of others changes. When we listen to our children and realize that they have enormous potential, rather than trying to train them to behave like us, we want to learn from them, because they're bringing in fresh new awareness. And the best thing they can do is remind us what it's like to be a child. So there are lots of practical things all day, every day, that if we just stop and take a deep breath and pay attention, you start seeing, other people say it's signs. Well, the universe is always talking to us, because we are the universe. We see what we want to see. So the reflection is back to us. And that can be challenging when you go to the news, for example, because a lot of what we see there is slighted on not empowerment. It's basically not designed to make you feel good about yourself. So I just don't watch it. It's a simple choice for me, because I'd much rather, go outside and breathe deep breath of air and look at the trees and the flowers. We happen to be by Disney World. I enjoy going over there. I can be around thousands of people and be perfectly happy, because, I'm around people that are having just a natural experience. And I can be amongst the crowds and not be involved, and yet I can feel the happiness in them, because I'm feeling the happiness in me. So it really is up to each of us how we wish to experience the world. And if we encounter limitation, you might let go today, and it might surface a year again. You might surface 10 years down the road, but each time you encounter it with greater wisdom, and it's easier to not let it rule your life. And that's what you were kind of saying, is it's not so much that you have to effort at unconditional love, because you can't. What you're doing is you're really allowing unconditional love to permeate into the very cellular atomic structure of your beingness, where it's just the natural response. So you end up encountering limitations, and then you say to yourself, well, that's not how I wish to be. And then you just let it go. And it may not be that easy. I will grant anyone listening to this, it may not be that easy the first time you try it. But to your point, to our point, my point, it's worth trying, because what you get out of it is potential that you never dreamed of. You get to experience life in ways that you never expected to experience it. And then, rather than being an isolated moment, I just had a euphoric moment. I just was in touch with myself and the universe. That becomes more of the baseline. That becomes more how we live life. And then our experience of life keeps getting better and better. And happiness is just kind of a natural state of being, because when you're okay with yourself, you're happy with yourself, you're happy with life. That doesn't mean that we don't keep exploring or expanding. It just means that we're okay with where we're at. And we recognize our potential is something more, and that the past got us here. In other words, the past is almost the least informative to our moment, other than it got us here. So no matter what we've done in the past, we did an outreach, for example, with a halfway house for women coming out of prison, mostly drug ladies, but they were in a year-long state sponsored project, and we would go in there and just kind of every week sit with a group of women that had, they were in the halfway house transitioning to get back out in the world in a positive way. And we just brought unconditional love. We brought these same kind of concepts, to them. And what we found is that they were all good people that made interesting choices. They were actually quite powerful individuals, because some of their habits were very expensive, and what they had to do to make it happen was quite a lot of effort. But here they were given a chance to kind of reconnect with life. And then we were just volunteering and coming in and giving them a perspective that they were okay. And what we found is that they had really never experienced unconditional love. They had never, to get a hug, that wasn't normal. A hug that was genuine and not expecting anything. A recognition that they were okay was not something that they had heard. And I would often say to them, if I come here next week and you say that you killed your mother, I'm being abrupt, I'm going to still love you unconditionally. I'm not necessarily going to agree with your choice. I think you could, other choices, but I'm still going to love you. And who does that? I mean, in other words, we are still always loved, lovable, and loving. Always, always, always. This love nature is our intrinsic nature. Everything else is essentially the illusion. And the more I've come back into my love nature, the more reality is based on love. And the more experience I have that's based on love. And isn't that really kind of what any major religion talks about? I mean, science kind of always talks about our potential. I mean, it all just kind of falls into place when you go within. It seems to be disjointed when we're looking for others to complete us, or we're looking for our jobs to complete us, or we're looking for money to complete us. We're looking for riches or status or whatever it is that we're looking to try to complete us. Those should just be simple enhancements to the joy we're already experiencing.
Okay, this is amazing, and I really like when you said like to learn, think, and feel, like that you use the word learn first in order for us to be able to think and then feel differently. So because that's one of the things that I really highlighted, like when you're explaining so many things as well. But that the fact that you put that word first, learn before think and feel. So in order for,
it's kind of almost like relearning in a way. We're relearning to be our natural self,
the authentic self, right?
Yes,
and
exactly.
And it's thinking, feeling, and then being. And as you explained that we are basically like who we are is love. And if we're not being that, it means we're not feeling love. It means we're not thinking, right? We're not choosing the thoughts, because you said it's about choices, right? We're not choosing the thoughts that would lead us to feel that way and then to be that way, to be love, to feel love and then being that love. And does it mean that because it's about thinking a certain way and then feeling a certain way, then being a certain way? And I've read this somewhere else as well, that we are not our thoughts.
Yes.
Do you agree with that? And can you, if you do, like, can you elaborate your opinions or your perception on that?
So yes, and this is where it gets kind of airy-fairy, loosey-goosey, because in fact, most of the thoughts we entertain are existing thoughts we've picked up along the way. They're opinions, beliefs, ideas from others. It's what we've studied in school. And let me just one of the phenomena that I've encountered in the last few years. When I went to school, there were no computers, no phones, no Google. It wasn't quite the Stone Age. We weren't doing tablets. We were a little more progressive than that. Yet everything I was taught in school about science, for example, the Earth had water. Nothing else had water, and you needed water to have life. And that's just all I've kind of carried, because I hadn't really studied astrophysics or anything kind of since. I really never readdressed that formative belief system. That's all that existed, in encyclopedias and in books and in science and what was taught in school. Well, of course, a lot of advancements in technology has allowed us to explore the cosmos differently. Well, I start watching astrophysics shows about the cosmos and, our own star system and our own galactic system. And, they're saying there's water here, everywhere. I mean, it's like every moon's got water and there's trapped water here. And I'm like, and I kind of shook my head. I'm like, excuse me, when did we start finding water everywhere? And why is water now the number one element everywhere in the universe when I was taught differently? Well, that's really a great example of what happens is we get trained into thinking certain thoughts about life. And we get it trained culturally, we get it trained through our schools, we get it trained through our parents, through our rabbis, our ministers, whoever might be teaching us religiously. And we kind of, in those formative years, again, early age, we don't have a sense of self. So we absorb an enormous amount of other people's thinking.
Mm.
And we carry that forward. It becomes our own, and we can no longer distinguish which is my thought and which is a thought I picked up along the way. And in moment right now where we have international, we're able to do this, across the globe. We can pick up and in almost real time find out anything about anything anywhere. Well, that information is perspectives and selective. So what we find is only ever going to be a facet of what's really going on. So kind of to my point in this conversation, what I'm suggesting is that when we go within and we start to discern what are my thoughts, well, that kind of is a way of saying, this is what I've been taught, or this is what I picked up on. Is this really how I see my life? In other words, for many of my formative years, I was only ever taught, in the business world competition and sports world competition, everything's competition. When I started to go within and I started hearing and thinking of this word collaboration, I thought, well, what does that mean? And started thinking, collaboration is when you selflessly interact with others for no gain. You interact, you take your skill set and whatever you have to offer when you work with another, and that's collaboration. You're not expecting monetary, remuneration for it. And in other words, and nobody's going to lose because everybody's going to win. And collaboration just became a natural understanding for me. It's like, when I started thinking everything's a problem, I thought, no, actually, everything's a challenge. And then I thought, well, no, actually, everything is a solution. I just have to discover it. So evolutionary wise, you begin to question everything. And then you begin to question, what do I think versus what others think? And if I'm not concerned about what others think about me, then I'm free to think about whatever I want to think about. And I will say this way of being, because you mentioned as kind of thoughts, feelings, way of being, you could also put way of being at the beginning. In other words, if we're a way of being, then our thoughts and feelings will be influenced by that way of being. And when you said that, I was like, well, that's actually an interesting, because it permeates all of it. And I immediately thought, well, one of the things that I do and have done for most of this awakened time period is meditate. And, initially it was like meditation was something I didn't quite understand, didn't know quite how to do it. There were all kinds of how to train yourself to do it. And there were methods out there. Well, I found that meditation for me was just quieting my mind. So when I quiet my mind, I let these thoughts just flow. And eventually I get to a point where I'm not thinking. And in that kind of nothingness, I notice in nothingness is everything. Even though you see or perceive nothing, the infinite potential of nothing is infinite potential, which means if I meditate and I quiet my mind, then in that natural state of not thought, I'm actually connected to infinite thought. And then out of meditation, depending on where I am in my life, in that I can get new solutions, new ideas, new directions out of that silent not thought that becomes a thought. And then if that thought intrigues me, if I'm inspired by that thought, then I will feel it more and I will say, ooh, I like that thought. Let me go pursue that impulse. Let me go pursue that. So it's a kind of a shift of understanding whose thought am I really thinking? Is it mine or is it others? Most of it is others. To that idea that not thought is actually where all the potential is. And yet I'm still in this world, which means I have to function on thought. So what we're doing is making this transition from other people's thought to not thought, a way of being. And if I look at it from a standpoint of, if I look at life and say, well, in this moment, infinite potential. Well, infinite, I might sit here and say, oh, I want $1 million. That's infinite potential. It may not happen in the next, the next 6 seconds, $1 million coming to me. However, if I feel wealth, and I will do a footnote to this, wealth is a perspective. So if I feel a wealth of love, if I feel a wealth of compassion, if I feel a wealth of kindness, money is simply an energy, and it by itself will never bring us those things. There are a lot of billionaires out there that are very unhappy because they're trying to protect their wealth, their financial manifestation, but their lives are in shambles because they don't actually have a recognition of how that kind of came into their world. Other parts of the world and of their reality are not functioning well because they don't have this connection to the wholeness. It's a wholeness piece. So wealth is inclusive of everything. And when I recognize my own personal wealth in that standpoint, the fact that I have an infinite imagination, I've had infinite numbers of experiences in my past, and right here and right now, all things are possible. That's a wealth beyond measure, because that means if I want to become a doctor, I still have a chance to do that. I can find the ways to become that. If I want to become an artist, I can begin to explore art. Running a marathon can still do that at pretty much any age. If you want to become a billionaire, you can start it at any age. In other words, it really is, where are you placing your attention? And I'm going to add another dimension, is kind of, we've hit on it already, kind of a higher self. There's a grander nature of us. Our pure potential kind of coexists. In other words, the now today, as I mentioned, that I love myself now, or I'm waiting a week from now. Well, there's a part of me that has already become that week from now. Well, there's a part of me that has already become many of my desires. So there's a part of me that sees my pure potential, that recognizes me, loves me, is lovable. When I tap into that, I can actually be, again, we're getting a little airy-fairy here. I can actually observe myself being myself. In other words, I can hold dual perspectives. And I mentioned in my book, because that was the first time I mentioned in that book about being multidimensional. At that point, we live in a three-dimensional world. We know about 4 dimensions. We know about the 5th dimension. But I think science has got 26 dimensions at the moment that they've identified. Mind-blowing kind of understanding. But we are multidimensional. In other words, we can actually watch ourselves having an experience. Therefore, we can hold a simultaneous view of, I'm in this world having this choice and this experience, and I'm aware of a broader perspective. And the more I can be simultaneously aware of a broader perspective, I now have more choice than if I'm just focused. If I'm focused in conflict, and that's all I see, I will rage that conflict into a very uncomfortable position. But if I can catch myself starting to go into conflict with another or with myself, I now see more perspectives than the one, and I can actually step back and say, wait a minute, how do I really want to play this moment out? So there's so many more aspects. In other words, this isn't a finite discussion about unconditional love, and this is love, and now I've got it. Yay, we're going forward. This is, to your point, this is an exploration that all day, every day, we can find more about life, the universe, and everything that we ever perceived before. And it's because we're letting go of our own limitations, our own limiting views. We're allowing ourselves to be ourselves. We're allowing ourselves to be our own best friend. We recognize that, all the experiences we're having, touch, taste, feel. I mean, even the touch piece is kind of ironic in a way, because there's so much space between the atomic structure of the electrons, protons, neutrons. But I once read that if you were to take the actual physical mass of an entire bodily being, it would barely fill a thimble. That's how much space there is between all the so-called physical particles within us. So when we're touching, we never actually touch. We're perceptive, and then it's our brain that's interpreting and having the experience. And of course, we think everybody thinks like we do. We think everybody feels like we do. It's not how it happens. In other words, some people visualize things in their head. They're, fantastic visualizing. Some people hear stuff, and that other people are kinesthetic. They need to touch everything. And we're all processing differently, but we're all trying to make everybody behave one way. And it's just never going to work. We are too diverse for that. And we're in a space now where we're coming to realize, through science, through technology, through many of the things that are, and just having conversations like this. I mean, you're taking an exploration in your life, in this lifetime, that many of your peers are not doing. There are people who will be listening to this podcast that are finding it synchronistically, the right thing, right time, right place, and yet it speaks to them in ways that they never conceived of. Well, it's because they're beginning to say, there's more to life. And I think that was kind of my initiation point. There has to be more to life. And somewhat, so a little tiny story. Part of it is my logical. I did the schooling. I went and got my master's degree, business, did banking, all that kind of stuff, and doing everything right, not necessarily being happy. And then I was volunteering for a large nonprofit, and we had a young professionals group, and we all kind of became friends. We were fundraising for this nonprofit, and somebody suggested, kind of like on a dare, we should all go to psychics separately. No. This is like, no, so I went with it, and we did it. And it was funny because I went, and there was nothing that the so-called psychic said that was ever, that I remember even coming true, or anything that seemed to be, fortune telling or anything. But she said stuff about me that not even my mother would know. General stuff, but still, as I'm sitting there, it was like, well, how can you know that about me? And I didn't understand that. I'm like, my little logical brain was having a hard time with that. And then, not anything spectacular came out of that specific moment, that hour-long session. But the drive home, it was like my whole world unraveled, because everything that I thought was so solid and grounded and logical and linear and specific, now there was an influence that was other dimensional from a total stranger that should know things about me, having never met me. And then as I'm going home, I realized that was kind of the unraveling. I started to think and feel bigger. And then I started to realize I had been doing this all my life. I'm not implying that I was psychic. I was aware and becoming more aware that I could perceive things in others that they couldn't perceive, and primarily potential. And I had been doing it kind of all my life. So I kind of came into this world more adult-like, more soul-like, and never feeling like I never called my parents mom and dad. I just called them by their name. I beat to a very big, different drum, and I didn't realize it at the time why I was different, because I was trying to fit in. But in fact, I was having a lot of natural awarenesses, and I think that catapulted me into why, when I started to explore myself, who am I really, it came really fast and furious. In other words, I wrote a lot of this happened 88, 89, 90. I wrote my first book in 92, it was published in 93. And by then I was already writing about everything in just the 1 or 2 year time span. I was writing these comprehensive books on all these various aspects. It's just like everything made sense. And in my books, for example, I don't quote or cite anybody. Everything I do, I experience first. I would never share anything that I have not found true for my life, or ever ask anybody to follow anything that I'm doing. I keep it general. I'm very careful with for example, the wording, because I want it to be universal. I want anyone of any language, of any culture, to feel their own resonance with their own love, because that's the unique part. It is not anything that could be shown to me in a way that says, oh, you get it, you don't. It's not how this works. This is a self-driven journey of life, and we make out of it what we choose to make out of it. And I can only speak for myself that when I started to ask deeper questions, those answers started coming. And as those answers started coming and I started to apply them, you said you work it, you have to keep on top of it. I call it practice. That was kind of like, you have yes, you have to keep unconditional love in the forefront. But if you already are it because you claimed it, this is kind of my point, and I'm a little stubborn with it. But if you love yourself unconditionally, you love yourself unconditionally, whether it's this moment or 10 years from now. And in the meantime, there are conditions that can throw us off. The quicker we remember unconditional love, the quicker we respond to unconditional love, the quicker we get back on our expansive pathway. And I can only say, for me, life became very interesting when I started to go within. And then everything else was boring in comparison. I went plant-based around the same time. And, all of a sudden I go from, doing everything, eating all the meat and everything. And I started, for a variety of reasons, I just, want to choose to feel better. And I found that removing meat, I felt better. And as I did that, I'm like, all of a sudden what was just normal, if these are the meals you eat everywhere you go, now it's like reading labels and paying attention and choosing to go in restaurants I would never go on. A lot of ethnic restaurants, non-American or non-Western, a lot of cultures have vegan vegetarianism in their diet. So all of a sudden I had moved up to DC, and all the embassies are there, so all the cultures are there. I was going to restaurants that I would have never fathomed going into, just because I made a simple choice to feel better. And by feeling better, I removed meat. And by removing meat, it gave me different avenues of where to go find meals that didn't include meat. Well, still that way 35 years later, and still find it a joy because I get to explore things. I'm not doing things out of routine and habit. I think that those two words kind of explain too what you're asking, is that we get set up in routines and habits, and we live these routines and habits. We don't recognize that those routines and habits were established in formative years in many ways by others. So, when we make choice to say, in an American-centric way here, you choose to go plant-based, back in when I did, not many people, still to this day, not many people. And yet you have to be okay with the fact that, that's your choice. And a person can sit next to me and have a steak. Does not bother me in the slightest. I have no interest in it. But it doesn't mean that the person next to me can't have it. I'm not going to judge it. I mean, there are a lot of angry vegans out there. Somebody that's pure vegan and doesn't eat any meat, they get very upset about it. Well, yes, of course there are ramifications for our choices on the planet. What I find is, as I make my choices, I just choose to be me. And people say, well, you can't eat meat. Of course I can. I just choose not to. Point of power. Doesn't mean that it could change maybe someday I choose to. But in other words, these are things that I choose this. I choose to love myself unconditionally. I love myself so much that I make these choices. Is a very different perspective than most people have been raised. So the habits and routines, are they really our habits and routines? And we know, if we shift a habit or routine, 30 days later, we become a different person. You stop being an alcoholic. If that's what, somebody becomes an alcoholic, they stop going to bars, they stop going to liquor stores, they stop hanging out with people that drink. There's a lot of chaos that happens when you decide to give up drinking. I never did, so I never had to. But I do recognize that, when we change habits and routines, new things unfold. And for some people, that can be uncomfortable in that transition. It's like moving out of one house to another. There's a time period of chaos because you box everything up out of the old one and you carry it over to the new one and you unbox it there. So there's chaos, routine, chaos, and then new routine. Yeah. If you can kind of live every moment of every day with that, and that would be the ultimate inquiry, is how to live every day with fresh expectation. Every moment of every day is a new beginning. Ultimately, every moment of every day is a new beginning. Ultimately, this past has nothing to do with this now, and now I'm in the new now, if you're going linear. It's perhaps a little more multidimensional but to break it down in simplicity, this past moment has nothing to do with this moment, and this moment is where I get to choose, and this moment will influence the next moment where I get to choose again. So therein lies that practicality that you spoke of, and therein lies you do it because you kind of want to explore life your own way in your own terms. And what more could you actually ever want out of life than to actually really genuinely dive deep into it and explore, deep dive that exploration, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything that's possible. Because in fact, part of it is, it's a contrasting world. It's a dualistic world. We're going to have moments where things of our past show up and we get to readdress them. And what I find is, over time, my ability to readdress things that perhaps were old routines and habits, when they surface, I can say, oh, I see you for what you are. If it's good, I'll keep you in it. And if it's no longer working, then I'll let you go and buy something different. There are a lot of carpenters that would make great lawyers. There are a lot of lawyers who would make great musicians. But a lot of people are doing things for the wrong reasons. They're doing it because other people told them to. And of course, I'm suggesting kind of the most radical approach is go do what you want to do. that wouldn't go over in many cultures. In other words, I'm saying go be you. And I can say, based on the individuals that I get to play with around the world on a daily basis, they're all individuals that have found this same understanding in their own way, and they have done unexpected things in their life, and they're much happier for it because they found their groove rather than playing the tune to something outside of themselves.
Wow, this is so fascinating, Harold. Um, I
And hopefully practical.
yeah.
Because to me, it's very important that it's practical, because I think that's what's often missing in psychology or in religions. It's like, you need real concrete, my thoughts and feelings. I can do something with that. A choice, I can do something with that. Those are things that make sense to me, and I have some sense of interaction with.
And for me, it is practical. Yes, you did explain it from the foundation first. This is the way I experienced what you're explaining, what you're sharing right now. You're explaining it from the foundation first, from the philosophy. Uh, so when you have a strong foundation, it'll help, at least for me, and I'm sure everybody who's listening to this as well, to understand better. And when they understand better, they can apply it better. That's the way I see it, the way I interpret this as well. And also the way one of the things that I one of the takeaways is the key here is about being aware that you have the choice, that awareness from moment to moment, that in every moment you always have the choice, and then being aware if what you're experiencing now is not what you want to experience, to be aware that you have the option, the choice to do something about it, right? And if this has been something that's been going on for a long time, this maybe not being able, not to love yourself, and not to be able to feel love, it's been something that's been going on in a long time. Once you finally come to that realization that, hey, I actually have a choice, I can actually, it doesn't have to be like this for the rest of my life. I can do something about it. I want to do something about it, or maybe I want first, and then I can do something about it. And and then also, because it's been in the past, even though the future doesn't have to be the same as the past, right? But because in the past it's been going not as I wanted, and then there's this resistance, right?
Yes.
At least at first, like you said, at least at first, there's this resistance. There's this, and usually it comes from some kind of fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some kind of fear, um, and that's why he also mentions earlier as well, that you need to have the courage to make that change as well, the self honesty as well, and that can be uncomfortable.
Yes.
Um, from your experience, and your client's experience as well, usually, what are the most common fear that makes people find it difficult to build that courage to actually do something about it, even though they already want to do it?
So we're learning how to live
Mhm,
truly. In other words, this conversation is how to truly live for ourselves and embrace our magnificence.
mhm.
It is not usually spoken outwardly because it's not necessarily recognized. We collectively and individually are most afraid of our true power, our sovereign power, our creative power. In
We're
other
afraid of
words,
our true power.
we're afraid of the fact that we are actually that powerful. In other words, a person that loves is going to be infinitely more powerful than millions who are not. A million people in fear and one person in love, you can change the vibration just by being love. It's like lighting a match in a room.
Mm.
You get to choose whether you light up that group. You could walk into a chaotic scene, and if you started playing beautiful music, the vibration difference would be so great that you would be untouched in essence and could very well sway a crowd to a more peaceful approach. We are afraid of our power to create, which is why most people are either they succumb to leadership that allows them to be subservient to that leadership, and they elevate leadership to tell them how to live in one way or another. And leadership is across all the various, moda, the way we are on the planet. That leadership, we elevate them, and they are usually equally, if not more so, insecure, because they feel so disconnected from themselves that they feel they need to hoard the power and they need to control the belief systems. Well, when you can't be controlled because you're thinking freely for yourself, you simply don't participate. You're vibrating out of the lower conditions. In other words, there's a scale, David Hawkins, author, once wrote, did a whole bunch of study and the various scales, and you get the lower 200s, 200 and below, apathy, anger, those types of things, very fear-based, separatist-based, hate, those are all low vibrations. Then you get into,
right.
Yes, and then you move up into that consciousness where you move into more compassion, more kindness, and love is a 500 and above. And it's really interesting because I've recognized this. You can get to 499 and understand love academically, knowledgeably, but there's a whole different leap when you go into 500, because in 500 with true love, you actually let go of what you think is love. In other words, my definition, unconditional love is an unlimited way of being, is descriptive of its universality, but you have to let go at some point because unlimited is unlimited. You cannot define it. You just point the way. And that is when you go to the 500s and above, you start going from love to joy, intrinsic joy, and then you go into, even higher states of awareness. So much of the, if you were to give $1 million to a poor person, chances are that money would be gone within no time. In other words, people are vibrating where they're vibrating, and it's their choice where they wish to move, say, up this Hawkins scale of consciousness, or whether they choose to stay in hate or fear or disconnect, or whether they choose to think for themselves and step into love and step into joy and step into compassion and be kind. In other words, this kind of it's timeless, universal. In other words, this is the way it's always been happening. But say, war has been on the planet. You go, anything we see on the planet right now, it happened 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. This is nothing new. We are not experiencing anything new except what we're talking about. We've not done this before. We have not been in a place on a planet where we are speaking of consciousness in real time around the world in the standpoint of, I'm an infinite being, I'm an infinite spiritual being having a human experience. We're exploring things. We're actually going through a consciousness shift on the planet where we're beginning to recognize our true potential that was always there. Now, if you lived in a village during the Dark Ages, you didn't venture more than 20 miles in any direction, and not a lot of interaction, a lot of inbreeding, not a lot of exposure to anything else. Well, we're in a time period where we have gone the longest without significant wars. We have definite battles. I'm not denying that there are battles going on, but we have not been in a war situation since World War II. So we're going on 60, 75 years, it's a long time period of more stable peace than ever. And we're going from a standpoint for horse and buggy to talking about putting people on Mars. We've got spacecraft that have gone past our own solar system. We have solutions in medical fields that, just are amazing. So we have all this technological awareness, and we have this infrastructure that allows us to speak real time with real people all around the world. So we get to figure out, wait a minute, I interacting with somebody over here, and they're just like me. That's not what's being told by other people. So I get to make the choice of, wait a minute, I'm having a different experience. Now, we also have youth who have been playing games, for example, online, and they've already been interacting with a worldwide consciousness, and they already recognize, the youth of today, and this is where it's so brilliant. I kind of come out of, that my previous generations, were this logical war energy, And then people like myself have made the choice to understand life in a broader way. Well, the children that are coming on the planet right now are naturally, they don't see color, they don't see race, most of them do not see anything other than unity. And they're the ones that are going to be making the decisions. We are moving in the right direction, even though the current state on the planet seems chaos. Well, we're moving from one paradigm to a new one. So we're kind of moving out of the old house of war and conflict to a new house of collaboration and diversity and understanding, creativity. There's chaos. So when you can have that bigger, broader perspective, you're less inclined to be concerned or fearful of what's going on, more inclined to be empowered and then making choices in the sphere of influence. So, for example, in our own physical body, we're electromagnetic beings. So we are not contained just in this body. Our hearts are pumping on electrical energy. We actually have a field about us that goes out anywhere from 6 feet beyond. So as we pass through, passing by people, we are exchanging a vibrational countenance. If our vibration is higher in love, and we walk by someone that's perhaps having a very difficult day, even by a smile or even just by walking past them, we can influence them because they can feel a moment of lightness that breaks them out of their rigidity at that moment, and they start to think slightly bigger just by walking past them. Better yet, if we can make eye contact, better yet, if we can bring a smile, better yet, if we can, bring a sense of encouragement. We don't know where people are in any one moment, and it's a moving field. In other words, we all have good days, we all have days that are not so good. So the more we stay trained ourselves, practiced in and stabilized in a being of love, the more powerful our influence is in the world around us. And that field is just like the internet. The internet is an electronic grid around the world. So our field is an electronic grid, but in this case, we're connected to the earth itself, the animal, plant, and mineral kingdoms, and we're connected to each other. We're interconnected to everything. So if I'm a point of light choosing to be more loving, I'm adding to that grid of love, which means someone who's in enormous difficulty 3,000 miles away could perhaps feel that spark of potential and wake up and say, oh, I do have choice. And again, as we've re-encountered each other in this lifetime, it's been over 16 years when you found my book and never probably at that moment thought you would ever be having this conversation. Isn't life a freaking miracle? Isn't it just absolutely miraculous that through technology, you were able to have a book that gave you insights about yourself that you then took and incorporated, only to use social media that did not exist in its format in 2008 to synchronistically stumble across me to establish this opportunity to come back. It kind of encapsulates the point. This is what I've been living for over the last 30 years. This is how my life works. In other words, with our nonprofit, we don't broadcast, and yet people in 175 countries have found us. We do things because we just simply share and resonate this understanding of unconditional love, and in the right time space, people find us. And it's like, for many instances, the compliment and the feedback I get is that I found where I belong. This makes sense to me. Everything else that I have encountered never seemed to give me this. And in many instances, again, I've used this statement, American-centric, Western-centric, because I want to share with people, you're in Indonesia, you have more of an Asian-centric. We are going to be bound to a degree by our cultures. In other words, where we are located geographically and culturally will influence our belief systems. And then beyond that, whatever cultural or religious aspects, but I do acknowledge that I use an American voice. I am more familiar with American eccentricities and Western eccentricities. So, of course, I recognize that my predominant state will be influenced by the collective belief systems. When we launched Global Love Day each May 1st back in 2004, I can only say that, in essence, by launching this celebration of our humanity, which is what this particular day is for, my consciousness shifted right along with it, because all of a sudden, no longer did I just think in terms of American-centric, Western-centric, and no longer did I just think of what I typically am informed about, which is European, Eurasian, Asian, now we got the whole Southern Hemisphere, completely different clock cycle. They're going into winter and we're going into summer. I just became aware that I was part of the entire planet. And so my vocabulary, my wording, my reach expanded with that understanding that I needed to be mindful that other people are experiencing other things. And so I would word things to, you say, oh, we're going into summer. Well, no, not everybody. Half of them aren't. In other words, you start getting a more global consciousness. These are all things that I've experienced because of the nature of focusing on love and recognizing the oneness in humanity. It has shifted my personal experience dramatically and my interaction with others dramatically. And what I have done for, pretty much every day for 35 years, I get up and I don't know what's going to happen this day. I might have some vague plans in place, but I allow for space for spontaneity and change of plans and for new things to come in. And because of that, every day is a new adventure. Every day is a new beginning. Every day is an opportunity to have an experience like this that I would not have known of just a few weeks ago. Could not have even planned, could not have no knowledge. And yet there was wisdom that inspired you to stumble this way, reach out, and then me recognize it and reach back. And here we're having this beautiful conversation of potentials. And that is learning how to truly live. I mean, the subject of and the focus of your podcast and what we're talking about is taking it to a whole new level. Is really learning how to live. I mean, we can talk all day, every day about finances and relationships and health, and we can identify all kinds of aspects for everyone, and then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when you actually start to love yourself, your relationship with yourself changes your relationship to the significant others. The relationship you have with yourself and your body changes the level of health. You vibrate in happiness. The body is however many percentage of water, and water is influenced by vibration. And when you think negative thinking, it affects the body. The cells deteriorate. When you think positive thinking, it uplifts. This is all scientifically identifiable. Well, health, relationships, income. When you feel good about yourself, you naturally do the things that make you happy. And wherever you're happiest, that's where you're going to have the greatest flow. And, this is like relearning, remembering, reconnecting to that magnificent self and going out into the world and living, for many of us, really for the first time. We've been so inculcated and indoctrinated to live other people's lives. It's very different to start to live your own. And what does that mean in a world where you're still interacting with a lot of people all day, every day, and their views may not be in any alignment with yours? And what we often find out is when you start to love, if people can no longer push your buttons, for example, they're not going to be very comfortable if your response is loving and forgiving. At the same time, vibrationally, the law of attraction says you're going to attract, what you give out, you get it back. What you get back is going to be what you're living. And that has certainly been my experience, is that the more I love, the more I can say, for example, I can go to a restaurant, maybe not go for 5 years. I come back 5 years later. If the same people are there, they're going to remember me, because I go into places and I see everyone as my equal. I treat everyone the way I wish to be treated, kind of that golden rule. And it should not be unusual, however it has been, for people to be treated that way. But for me, it's like I recognize that I'm so thankful, grateful, appreciative for those that help me, serve me, share with me. So I include them as part of my experience in that moment. So I'm including them, even though they're performing a task perhaps that is serving me. I include them as appreciation for the fact that they're serving me, and I ask them, how are they doing? Where are they from? And those types of things, because that's what makes the world go round. We reconnect with each of us, and every moment is an experience. Every moment is a relationship. If you have a good relationship with yourself, you're going to have good relationships with everybody you encounter. And when you don't, it's really probably because you're off on some level. And it's opportunity to say, oh, and we can't make friends with everyone, but we can certainly leave our kindness and compassion wherever we're at. And these are the ways where we begin to live very differently on the planet, with more conscious awareness of ourselves, more conscious awareness of our connection to everything. There is no separation, there's only unity. And anything that speaks of separation is not unity. So I can't change how other people perceive the world, nor do I want to. I can change how I perceive the world and how I interact with it. And that's a fundamental and powerful stance, because it's my choice. And that is back to that full circle conversation, is we do have choice. We can choose to love, or we can choose to not love. And really, not love is not really an option, because you can't not love. We're always love. All you can do is mentally, emotionally pretend that you're not loving. And that's the illusion. And that's what we've been dealing with on this planet for eons of time. So the love is always there. Absolutely, positively always there. It's whether or not we align with it, or whether we don't align with it.
Harold, that's beautiful. Wow. Again, thank you so much for sharing this, and not just sharing these words, but the energy as well. Because like you said, like everything is connected, and even though like we're like geographically so far away, and we don't know who's listening and who's watching this from another place, but I'm very sure people can feel this energy, and then can have this positive effect as well from your energy, and I appreciate that very much. And so for those who want to find out more about what you do, your work, where can they find them? Like, where can they reach
The
out
love,
or
yeah, the lovefoundation.com is our nonprofit, inspiring people to love unconditionally. Again, that's that's the essence of what we're doing. I also have internalinsights.com, which is we if you Google us or my name, you're going to find us. We're on all kinds of social media, and we have lots of posts out of Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn. So we're very findable. We have a variety of programs. So we share Global Love Day. You'll find us there too. We're easily found, and I definitely welcome anyone who may want to reach out. Reach out through our contact forms or through social media, and I will absolutely endeavor to get back and see what additional conversations or insights might be able to share. I enjoy doing that. This has been an absolute treat. I mean, as I said, the fact that you would have encountered my book in another country altogether, and that all these years later we would be having this grand conversation about just being. It's just this is what life is really about, and it's amazing, always magical, and certainly a joy to have been able to share on your podcast. So thank you for that. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for connecting with me.
Well, it started from you when you wrote that book, when you published that book. So it started from you. So I thank you as well. And for everybody like who's listening to this again, make sure you also like reach out to lovefoundation.com, and I'll make sure that all of your like platforms are in the description of this video as well. So everybody, you can just look on the description of this video, and make sure you buy, read, and apply what Harold is. Most importantly, apply.
Yes. Apply for
What
yourself to find out what it is. It's absolutely apply for yourself so you can find out your own potential.
Now that you said, I personally I have this strong belief that everybody who's reading that book will have their own personalized experience, because the book is about a journey within. So the experience will be different. It will be beautiful, but it will be like personalized based on our journey so far until the day we read that book.
And just as another airy fairy part, the book changes as I change. In other words, the words on the paper are not set in ink. And as I've changed and evolved, the understanding of all those words have broadened and expanded too, because you're also tapping into, as you read, this goes with any book and any experience we have, but it's always expanding. And then every reader and every individual like you're helping expand the potential of unconditional love, returning consciously upon the planet just by what you're doing and being. So there's great potential in all of this, as we find ourselves and reveal ourselves and share ourselves. And it's no one should feel insignificant. We're all powerful. We're all magnificent. We're all brilliant. And the only one staying in our way is ourselves. So get out of the way. Go enjoy life.
We're all love, and
Absolutely.
and thank you for being that love, and I love you as well for being who you are, and for everyone who's watching this, who's listening to this. I love you as well. And I hope you can feel it.
Yes, I do.
And then you become it, and then let everybody else as well around you to experience that love as well from you. So thank you so much for being here, Harold, and for everyone who's listening to this, watching this. Thank you again for coming here, and I'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.